International students, they are the ones to blame for our housing crisis here in Canada. Not even close. Come on, my friends. We're going to talk about all this and more right after the intro. Yes, many people out there would have you believe that the Canadian housing crisis is all to be blamed on the housing for university students, international students. Really? Really? We're going to debunk that myth and look at some of the ripple effect from international students. I got some articles that we're going to look at, but I want to say thank you to everyone that's been reaching out and dropping comments on our YouTube channel here and have been sending me messages about their local real estate questions and what's been going on in their local markets. I can help people right across Canada, so thank you. But today's message is all about international students. Are they really the ones to blame for our Canadian housing issues? Come on, really? Here's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at a couple articles that I have up here. We're going to share my screen. We're going to look at them together, and then we're going to do some math together as well. And you tell me what or who is to blame. I don't know if there's any one single person or thing to blame other than we haven't prepared properly as a nation for it, because there's some things happening, of course, with immigration, of course, with inflation, of course, we come out of COVID and we went on a buying flurry because interest rates were so low, but there's just multiple layers that have affected our housing industry and housing crisis. Okay, so let me share my screen. I'm going to look at a couple of things here and we're going to do some math together. I know, math on the fly. I don't know if I should do that. Okay, so here's an article. As Canada contemplates capping international students, what impact do they have on our country? Yeah, we're starting to have that conversation. Here's why it's a conversation. It's because students right now are going back to school. That's why it's at top of mind, top of everyone's radars, because all of our students, all of our friends and family are going back to school, and they are finding it incredibly difficult to find housing. And of course, we're going to look at that a little bit here. So as I scroll down, and you can see some of the information here, and I'm going to highlight a few things, but this is an article. Let me scroll back up. This is an article that just came out yesterday at 4 p.m. by Global News. And of course, you can watch that video there as they talk about what are the impacts that international students have on our economy, and of course, having the schools in its entirety. So cap consideration. Yeah, federal housing minister out of Nova Scotia, Sean Fraser, floated the idea of capping the number of international students coming to Canada. Is this a good thing? First and foremost, yeah, we think it's a good thing because, of course, for our families that live here already, we want to make sure that they can get the post-secondary schooling that they so require for their future lives and everything like that. So we want to make sure that they can get into school. And what we'll read here is schools have no problem accepting students. It's the housing that we're starting to see the issue here. And there's a lot of people that are getting behind this bandwagon of capping the limit. And we're going to debunk the myth on why we don't think that that's just going to happen, because the universities they've seen the light. They have seen the light, and we'll do some math on why they have seen the light. International students, I love this. Another minute. What am I trying to say? Monkeith Locust, past president of the New Brunswick Multicultural Council, agrees international students, as I look right here, are not the main cause of the housing crisis, he says. Those coming abroad study generate billions of dollars for Canada yearly. And we're going to talk about that, how much money they bring into not only the local economy, but the schools themselves. And that's why schools do not want to cap the number of international students coming here by the numbers. Yeah, this is really interesting. Last year, Canada, we welcomed more than 800 international students. This year, immigration in Canada estimates will receive more than 900,000 applicants for post-secondary schooling. It is a number that is just off the charts. And we're going to look at some information here from Benjamin Tall from CIBC, their chief economist, in just a second. This is pretty crazy. So let's look at the other article that I have up here, again by Global News. Let me scroll up to the top so you can see Canadian universities don't want a cap on international students, and here's why. And we're going to look into it a little bit. Of course, go watch this video if you want some more information on that. And here's some of the thing. Currently, as we just talked about, 800,000 student permit holders coming to Canada or spending time at post-secondary schools. And as I scroll down here, we're going to look into a couple of things from the economic standpoint. And I want you to focus in on this statement right here. According to Stats Canada, the gulf between domestic and international fees, as I'm reading right here, is significant. In 2022-23 academic year, the average domestic student in Canada paid $6,800 in tuition. By contrast, the average international student paid nearly 6 times that amount at $36,000. They've seen the light. They've been filling their pockets. The schools, that is. And if you look at the paragraph just below, this is the one that we're going to call out Global Affairs Canada, the report on, because their math is not accurate on this. Global Affairs Canada report said international students spend nearly $22.3 billion on tuition, accommodation. So in addition to tuition, accommodation and discretionary spending every year. This is in addition to international students being a major source of labor. Canada, which has faced a severe work shortage in recent years. Fine, I'm going to focus on this, and I'm going to tell you that this number is not correct. This number is actually so inaccurate that I don't know how someone's not even called them out on. So what do we know? We know, let's just base it on last year. 800,000 students international students are in Canada. We know that, okay, we're going to do some math here. Local Canadians are paying $6,800 in tuition. And if you're an international student, you're just paying over $36,000. So I know there's over 800,000. We're going to do some math. Watch this. We're going to do some math, and we're going to debunk some of this here. And we're going to say that I'm going to show you that international students paying in tuition is mind blowing. The amount of money. So we're going to put the numbers in here. 800,000 students times we're gonna do this difference here, but we're gonna do $30,000 just to keep the math simple. So we're gonna do 800,000 students times $30,000 in tuition. You want me to hit equals? I know you do. Watch this: $24 billion just in tuition. Not what this article is saying, and not what the Global Affairs Canada report is saying at $23.3 billion. That includes accommodation and discretionary. They're spending $24 billion just in tuition based on the information that they tell us here. So how can we, this is another one of those articles or stats that we debunk, and it's not even accurate. How can we believe what the government is putting out when their information is not accurate just by this information alone? Let's look on something a little bit different here, and let's look at this article. This is a report, and let me scroll back up here. Let's look at this report from Benjamin Tall, chief economist for CIBC. This just came out today, in fact, and he'll tell you counting heads in Canada is a conundrum. It's not even accurate. He's saying that the census and the numbers that the Canadian government is putting out is not even accurate. And there's far more people in Canada and coming to Canada. It's a big miss. You can go ahead and read this report. And what we're saying is some of these numbers could be off as about 1 million people, which is incredible. And I'm not going to go through this report here. You can do that on your own time. And I'll show you how to look that up, or I'll link to it in the show notes. This is the part that I want you to focus in on. It's the number of overstayers. So people that have their international visas or their short-term visas, how long are they staying, and are they staying? Yes, they are definitely staying. You can see by the numbers how many more of those people are staying. So that is incredible there. And we go ahead and read this report in its entirety, but there's a lot of interesting information in here what we have. And as I scroll back to the top, it's a big miss here. I want to highlight a couple of things here. In the report, Benjamin Tall talks about what if 10 years ago we had known Canada's population would grow to 40.2 million people in 2023. Well, we probably would have been better prepared for it. What we didn't anticipate is how many international students were coming. That's one thing, but that's not our problem for housing crisis. And the number of new and the number of new immigrants just coming to Canada. Read this report. Is really, really interesting. I always love what Benjamin Tall has to say. So is the international students the ones to blame for our Canadian housing crisis? No. Why is it top of mind? Why is it in the news cycle? Well, it's in the news cycle because all students are going back to school right now and they can't find housing. And I know, I've seen some of the tweets and everything else, and people are showing up in vans and looking for places to rent because they're going to be sleeping in their van all winter and all school year. There's hotels being acquired, or I should say, secured by universities so they can rent out the hotel rooms to their individual tenants, to their students as well. So they are thinking outside the box. If you read some of those articles and watch the videos, there are some other initiatives that have already been approved by previous governments that would allow the building of new residents for the universities. Of course, it's going to take government funding and things like that, but it's already been greenlit. And if you go watch those videos, you can certainly get some insight on that. But I'm gonna circle back to, I remember about 12, 15 years ago, as I was starting to educate myself as a real estate investor and getting some of that information. The one thing that we know when people start to lose their jobs, and we're starting to see that ever so slightly here in Canada, what do? What's one of the first things that people do? They go back to school. Well, that's going to create even more of an influx for these universities and for the housing and things like that. So for those that are looking to go to school or go back to school, or you have university age kids, so we're going to see a lot of the local schools around you, those enrollment spike from students that live at home. That's the ripple effect of it. But if you are, if you've been in Canada for such a long time and you've recently lost your job, one of the first things that you think of outside of getting a new job is going back to school and perhaps getting a different education, a different line of work. So now you know what you're up against. You're going to have to think outside the box. Again, does the housing crisis based on Canadian students, international students? No, it's based on a lot of other ripple effects. Of course, I think the biggest one is cheap money. So there's a lot of other ripple effects. Of course, the high interest rates is one. The cheap money was definitely a factor into driving up our housing prices around here in Canada. And the other big ripple effect is the cost of construction and the cost of development, which we'll talk about in other videos. Thanks again for watching. Please reach out to me. I'm happy to have a conversation about your local real estate needs. There's the info below. You know how to get a hold of me. I'll see everybody in the next video. Bye for now.